Yes.
Got through like wire most of them. The screen's not big enough.
The screen's not.
Jim, I was being nice. I wanted to invite you to be on the screen. And somebody made a smart remark.
We're live.
They don't want to scare people off.
Is that you?
I'm not gonna say who it was, but their initials.
Good afternoon. I'd like to call this special meeting of the Wilson County Board of Education for Monday, September 28th to order. Members of the board, we are asking for an approval of the agenda.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Powell,
I move we approve the agenda for the special meeting of the Wilson County Board of Education dated September 21st, 2020.
Second.
it has been moved by Mrs. Powell, seconded by Mr. Mercer, that we approve the agenda of the special meeting of the Wilson County Board of Education for Monday, September 28th, 2020. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion, please respond. Mr. Mercer? Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette?
Aye.
Mr. Breen? Mr. Farmer?
Aye.
Mrs. Powell?
Aye.
And myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. Members of the board, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to be followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Under the chairman's comments, members of the board, I'm happy to see others in attendance. It is basically because of considerations with the pandemic and with our ability to meet remotely. Most of you have been able to stay at home. I have been here for the meetings. I'm happy to have Mr. Mercer back in visual contact, Mr. Breen again in visual contact, Ms. Boyette in visual contact. We know that Mr. Farmer, Mrs. Powell, and Mrs. Barnes, due to health concerns, are not here physically with us, but we're happy to have you with us on Zoom as well as we continue with our Zoom meetings and being cautious of conditions that may affect us. Since our teachers are already back in place, we are discussing what's going to happen with the reentry of our students, with our being able to, again, have a somewhat face-to-face but yet remote meeting is deeply appreciated. We are here today because we are once again discussing the athletic fields and the track renovations at Beddingfield and Hunt High Schools. I guess it was back in May, we started a conversation and the board voted for 6-0 to have 6-lane tracks. We brought in architects who made proposals for 6-lane tracks, 8-lane tracks. We again voted to go with a 6-lane track in order to be good stewards of the funds that were allocated to us by the county commissions. Because of conversation that has since been had in regard to the track issue, and the fact that the county commissioners have asked us to once again come together and further the discussion on the track situations. We are here again today to facilitate that discussion. We do have the architects online with us, I believe, Dr. Mills.
That's correct.
And I am going to turn it over to you, Dr. Mills, who can then lead us where we're going at this point in time.
Madam Chair, board members, architects, principals, we've got folks from maintenance and central office here as well today. I've got some information I can pull up on the screen that's a summary, but we've all looked at the presentation materials that Mr. Alder and his staff have sent over time. I would show one screen to start with that will give you the highlights of the cost estimates for a 6-lane and 8-lane track. We had a really good conversation on Friday with David, with some folks here. And I know the board had asked us to look at a 6 and 8-lane kind of minimal options, but our conversation on Friday in conjunction with David was that the process we should use to talk about that should involve the architect sharing with us about whether or not what the priorities were for the board, and because it was not as simple as extrapolating data just from their presentation to cancel out certain amenities or pieces and parts that were needed. So they're here today to answer any questions and talk about what that process would be if the board so chooses to take that option. But for purposes of getting started, I'm going to share the spreadsheet, if you will, that just is a quick summary of where you are right now. Okay. So in the presentation materials and project materials that were sent by CPO Architects, there is a 6-lane track with, and what I've called full details, but means everything that goes with it, to try and save us some space on the screen, an 8-lane track. And if you remember, the betting fields cost was $922,000. Hunt's was a little over $938,000. And that would bring that total to $1.8 million, thereabouts. The same thing for the 8-lane track with the details. Bettyfield would be 1.2. Hunt's was at 1.1. The one change we've had when talking with CPL and their folks were that if we're looking at an 8-lane track for Hunt, then they do recommend a retaining wall for the second turn. That's the one with that large drop off from our visit out there for safety and for stability. So you'll see a difference there in the 6-lane, 8-lane track. The other differences, again, that puts them at 2.4 for 8-lane tracks with those details. The lights in the poles are $205,000 per site is what we anticipate being the cost for that equipment. So that's times 2. I will point out that it's not a requirement for a 6-lane track, but given the fact that you're going to be doing construction and making some upgrades there, it would be our recommendation to consider that. So if you were just looking at those track options right now, before you start having any more discussions, you're at 2.2 plus for the 6-lane track with lights at both sides, and 8-lane track with lights both sides, and the retaining wall that would be needed is at 2.8 and some change. So I did include in this spreadsheet, just for clarity, because this has come up in your discussions a couple times, it's a little easier to follow the other projects that you talked about. The paving at Bettyfield High School is completed, and that was $294,409. The lights for the baseball field at Pike were also a discussion point for the board. We've written mandatory on that because it's really important that we address that. Those lights are not adequate. They're on wooden poles and oil controlled. So that's $195,000. They're a little bit less than the cost for football fields or track lighting because of the requirements. And then the tennis court renovations at Hunt were also talked about in the past, and that was $198,000. So in looking at the projects that you have in a 6-lane track or an 8-lane track as presented here from the reports you've been given from the architects, we've looked at the funds you would need beyond the $2 million And so for the 6-lane track and existing projects, as you have them prioritized now, that's almost $1 million for a 6-lane track with the additional projects. And then it'd be a little over $1.5 million for an 8-lane track, the lights and the other projects. So that kind of catches you up from conversations you've had in the past. And at this point, I would ask the architects if they had anything to offer to that before you have some discussion. I have more information I can share in terms of feedback about some of these projects.
David, this is Dan Dodd. Do you want to give a quick overview, or should Don and I?
Sorry, Don. I was going to say, Dan, why don't you guys go ahead and give the overview since it's track related.
Yeah, let me just give a few sentences, and then I'll add Don Page here. So really, we originally went through and looked at a variety of scenarios for you guys in our conceptual planning document. And so what you're looking at now is to get that these schools up to 8-lane facilities, similar to your other existing high school. And so when we generally work on 8-lane facilities, we try to make them ready for state competitions or a variety of next level events, because they're very important for the track and field community when you host events. And so what you're seeing is a reflection in cost. And remember that these sites are complete rebuilds. We're not using any of the existing asphalt base. It's in just bad repair. These are complete rebuilds from subgrade up, that we will extend that project, from a 6-lane to 8-lane. You're looking at almost, a 30% expansion in the construction of that surface. And so that's why you see those numbers in general going up higher from 6 to 8. 6 is, most of our high schools that we work on are 8-lane facilities, and that's definitely what we see as, the more normal in track and field throughout the Carolinas. Don, do you have a few items to add?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was muted. One of the reasons we go to 8 lanes is for 2 issues. The interest, one at the state level, or if you host competition. Also, 8 is more conducive for daily training. Yeah, you have to remember we have boys and girls out there. We may have some middle school athletes, but if you just look at the high school teams alone, when they go out there for track practice, we have runners, jumpers, and throwers. Now, on the running side, with 8 lanes, we've got sprinters and hurdlers taking up some of the lanes on the straightaway. We have your 200, 400, and 800 athletes taking up some of the other lanes going around the oval. The distance athletes taking up some of the other lanes going around the oval. 8 lanes just makes it more conducive to daily training as well as competition. So when we did the report, as Dan mentioned, we always try to see if we can go to 8 lanes as a recommendation. Is it required by the high school rules? No, and we've gone through that. But today, most schools renovating their tracks, if they at all possible, can go to 8 lanes. They probably do it for the boys and girls for daily practice and also for hosting competition. So that's the reason. Thank you. I think that's all we have.
Okay, let me ask you a question. This is Dr. Fitch. You have, for the 8-lane track for Hunt, a $50,000 cost for a retaining wall for that second turn. But you have no retaining wall on a 6-lane track. With the track that we already have, there is that drop off, and that was the original concern that we had. Is that drop off at that second turn? And if so, why is there not a cost for some type of wall so you don't have that steep drop off?
Yes, that's a good question, and I'll start it off and let Don finish. We were gonna change the geometry of the 6-lane track to stay away from that drop off, and with the 6 lanes to work under your existing budget, we were extremely frugal to try to get these 2 facilities completed. And we were gonna use a combination of grading and redimensioning of the oval to potentially compensate for that area of drop off. Don?
Yeah, when you go from 6 lanes to 8 lanes, each lane is 3.5 feet wide. So if we add 1 or 2 lanes to the outside to go from 6 lanes to 8 lanes, we're adding either 3.5 feet or 7 feet to the outside of turn number 1. And without an existing survey, since we haven't really surveyed these sites, we're pretty certain that we would probably need a little retaining wall to help us hold up the turn of the first turn at Hunt. And that's why that $50,000, it's in there for that retaining wall. It's stone, it's asphalt, it's just to help it. So the track is bigger at 8 lanes. So it will be pushing towards that area that falls off sharply. So it's needed.
But only for an 8-lane track, not for a 6-lane.
That is correct. That is correct. At the 6-lane configuration, currently you have 6 lanes. We would maintain 6 lanes. We believe we have enough room to take care of that safety issue you had outside of turn 1. So we can fix that.
Now, is that turn 1 or turn 2?
It's turn 1. So there's 2 turns on a track. So the first turn is the turn past the common finish line. The second turn is down at the opposite end. So this is turn 1.
All right.
I have a question.
I grew up with NASCAR, sorry.
That's all right, no
I
problem.
got close.
Was that Mrs. Barnes with a question?
Yes, it was. I heard one of the architects say that 8 lanes was more normal. Could he define what he means more normal when they're doing tracks?
I'm not sure if I said that or Dan, but by term normal, more typical. More and more high schools today, when they renovate their facility, if at all possible, they try to go from 6 lanes to 8 lanes. 6 lanes were very popular 20, 30 years ago. And in the last 10, 15 years, as schools have renovated, and because you gotta realize 30 years ago, there probably weren't as many athletes out on the team. Some schools didn't have girls track. Now almost all high schools have girls and boys competing and training. So normal means on a typical basis around, say, just here in North Carolina, when a school renovates, if at all possible, if the land is large enough to fit 8 lanes, if their budget is large enough to go to 8 lanes, and also looking at your 3rd high school, currently they are already at 8 lanes. We always try to build the tracks that are equal to each other. We don't think it's appropriate to have 1 or 2 schools have lesser lanes or lesser jumping areas or lesser throwing areas than the other facilities. We want all the boys and girls in Wilson County to be treated equally. And whether they're boys or girls, it doesn't matter to us. They all partake in the sport of track and field.
Thank you.
Other questions? Mr. Farmer, you're quiet back there.
I was listening and trying to reflect. I'd like to be very, very clear to everybody that's listening to me, and I hope you can listen to me, and I wish I were there. I have immune deficiency and I cannot be in a closed room. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
sir.
I want to be very, very clear. I want everybody to rejoice, absolutely to rejoice, because whatever reason we have to make this decision, whether it's because we want the same thing at all the tracks, or because the county commissioners just want it to be this way. They hold the purse strings, and God bless them if they want to pony up more money. That was never the goal that was given to us. We were given $2 million to upgrade our athletic facilities, and we were asked to be good stewards of the money. Now, do we need to hear from the professionals? Yes. And evidently, we've got some people that are very, very good. But quite honestly, architects can do anything in this entire world if you ask them or tell them what you want, and you have the space and you have the money to do it. If it's an 8-lane track, obviously it's going to cost more money. If it costs more money, there's also going to be incentive because there's going to be more money to be made. Now, here again, let me be very clear. There is no right and there is no wrong. 6-lane versus 8-lane. I have made a great deal of phone calls. I have talked to Q Tucker. I have talked to more than a dozen athletic directors that are county-wide athletic directors. Because you can't ask a school athletic director or a school principal what they want, because they're always going to want the most and the best for their children. But your overall county athletic directors see the global picture. Now, we were told that we needed to be in line with our competitors. Beddingfield plays in the Eastern Plains 2A Conference. That is Beddingfield, Farmville Central, Nash Central, North Johnson, North Pitt, and Southwest Edgecombe. Beddingfield's got a 6-lane. Farmville's got a 6-lane. Nash Central's got an 8-lane. North Johnson's got an 8-lane. North Pitt has got a 6-lane. And Southwest Edgecombe has a 6-lane. That's 4 6-lanes and 2 8-lanes. We're very, very lucky because we have the best athletic director countywide in the state of North Carolina, and his name is Jimmy Tillman. Jimmy Tillman was at Southwest Edgecombe when they built that complex. It is a beautiful complex. It has 6 lanes. I too was at a very small school, but it was on a 1A level. I built a track and a facility, and I, at a very small track, built an 8-lane track. Go figure. Why did Jimmy build what he built? Why did I build what I built? Because of space and money. I had the space and I had the money. So why not? I'm sure Jimmy would have done the same thing if he had had the money. Now, Fike High School is in the Big East Conference, which is a 3A conference. And they play with Franklinton, Hunt, Northern Nash, Rocky Mount, and Southern Nash. Fike has an 8-lane track. It's been here the longest. Franklinton has an 8-lane track. Hunt has a 6-lane track. Northern Nash has a 6-lane track. Rocky Mount has an 8-lane track. And Southern Nash has a 6-lane track. That's 3 of each. Now, here again, in those situations, It's about the community, it's about the money, and it's about the space. Now, from there, another statement was made that if we build a 6-lane track, that's not the norm. And we're putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg. Well, I talked to Q Tucker about that. I talked to Julie Cochran about that. I talked to the Wilson Times Classic people that are responsible for that classic that's held every year. I talked to James Ward, who absolutely is the person that designates all regionals in Eastern North Carolina. He determines where they go. Q Tucker told me absolutely it did not matter whether it was 6 or 8 lanes. They were interested in the facilities that surrounded it. They were interested in the expertise of the person that was going to run it. They were interested in the timing equipment. They were interested in parking. They were interested in manpower. I think you get the picture of what I'm saying. But she said unequivocally, no difference. It did not matter. Now, obviously, you're going to have a few more heats if you have a 6-lane. But if you look at history of where the regionals have been, you'll see they've been on 6 lanes and they've been on 8 lanes in Eastern North Carolina. And we're a little bit different than East, and we're a little bit different than West, and we're a great deal of difference in the middle part where the large cities are. Now, with that being said, Q said, and I did ask her, I said, do you have any data on 6 lanes as opposed to 8 lanes? She said, Gary, and she's a good friend. I held 2 camps for her leadership programs, didn't charge her a thing. Residential camps know her very well. I said, have you got any data on 6 and 8 lanes? We got to make $1 million decision here on this thing. Gary, I don't. I can't tell you what schools have 6 lanes. I can't tell you what schools have 8 lanes. I said, okay, do you have any idea across the country what's going on? She said, no, but here, I'm going to give you the name of a person. She's over all the track in the United States. She's in the National Federation in Indianapolis. Her name is Julie Cochran. I called Miss Cochran. I asked her the same questions I'm asking you. She said, there is no norm. There is no data across the width and breadth of the United States. She also said, Gary, what about the 4-lane tracks? I said, what? She said, yeah, in the Midwest, in some of these little burgs that are very, very poor, they don't have room for a 6-lane or 8-lane track. So they put in a 4-lane track. She said, what about the 5-lane tracks? I said, what? She said, what about the 7-lane tracks? The 8-lane tracks, the 9-lane tracks? I said, no, Julia, you're absolutely muddying the waters. I can't deal with this. All I'm trying to figure out is what's the norm? She said, Gary, if you don't have money and you have to move poles like you said, why don't you do what a lot of schools do? Why don't you run 8 sprint lanes down one side and then run 6 lanes around the rest of the track? Because your sprint students are your most heats. And I said, would you have to go to the outside? She said, no, if you had the right architects, you could add 1 lane to the inside, 1 lane to the outside, and you wouldn't be dealing with the 7 feet we're talking about. I said, never thought of that. That's a good idea. I thank you very, very kindly. So from there, I started calling around. I called Ron Butler, and he's in Pitt County. He's the overall athletic director. I said, hey, Ron, what you got down there? He said, I've got 6 high schools, 5 or 6 lane tracks. 1 is an 8-lane track at Rose. I said, well, do you run all your track meets at Rose? No. And we run regionals at some of the 6-lane tracks. I said, do you get complaints about people not being able to be developed? No, I do not. I don't have any complaints at all. Are you going to change some of these tracks to 8-lane tracks? No, I'm not. I said, okay, Ron, I really appreciate that. I talked to the athletic director in Nash County. What you got? I got 4 high schools. I got 2 8-lanes and I got 2 6-lanes. One of the 6-lane tracks holds the most track meets of anybody. In fact, they have hosted the Wilson Times 6 times with a 6-lane track. I was stunned. Then I called Cumberland County and I got the shock of my life. I said, what you got down there? We got 10 high schools, Farmer. Okay. Well, tell me about your tracks. He said, we've got 10 tracks downhill. 7 of them are 6-lane tracks and 3 of them are 8-lane tracks. But they're very unique. I said, how do you mean unique? The 6-lane tracks are dirt. I said, what? They're dirt. You meant clay? Well, yeah, a combination. I said, oh, that explains something that I really couldn't understand. And he said, what? I said, a friend of mine told me, Gary, you don't have to call these athletic directors. Go to Google Maps satellite and put in the name of the school. I said, what does that do? He said, give me the name of the school. I said, North Johnson. He said, where's that at? I said, Kenley. He said, give me a minute. So he hung up. He came back online and he said, they got 8 lanes. I said, how do you know that? He said, because I went to Google Maps satellite and I put in North Johnson and then I zoomed down from the satellite and there is the school and the track and it's got a name on it, North Johnson High School. Oh my God. You've got your baseball fields, your softball fields, your track. I said, so what did you do? Did you count the lanes? No, I did not count the lanes. Well, what did you do? He said, there's great big Roman Gothic numbers that you can read from space. I said, you're kidding. He said, I'm not. I said, send it to me. And lo and behold, I could almost see the popcorn wrappers from the last time they had a meet there. I didn't have to do anything. So yesterday was a rainy day in Wilson, North Carolina. And I went online and I found through Google Maps satellite over 40 high schools in eastern North Carolina. And when I say eastern, I'm talking from Raleigh back to the coast. Folks, listen to me just 1 minute. I know I'm belaboring the point, but this is for your understanding of what's normal and what's not normal. Wake Forest High School, 4A football championships 2 years in a row. Huge school, 6 lanes. Enloe, one of the older schools in Raleigh, 8 lanes. Raleigh Broughton, the oldest school in Raleigh, 7 lanes. Oh, that's new. Franklinton, 8 lanes. Bunn, 8 lanes. East Wake High School, 7 lanes. Southern Nash, 6 lanes. Selma Smithfield, 6 lanes. Clayton, 8 lanes. Garner, 8 lanes. Millbrook, 8 lanes. Kinston High School, 7 lanes. Jacksonville, 6 lanes. Green Central, 6 lanes. Southern Lane, 6 lanes. Goldsboro, 6 lanes. Hoggard, 8 lanes. And then a knockout, one of the oldest schools in the state of North Carolina, high school wise, New Hanover in Wilmington, huge 4A school. No facility whatsoever. And I couldn't believe it. So I called down and I talked to, they don't have a county athletic director. They have school directors, and they've got 4 schools in New Hanover County. I said, sir, I don't understand. And I told him what I was doing. I said, please help me understand. Where do your kids practice? He said, did you see a track about 2 blocks over? I said, I did, but I didn't believe what I saw. And he said, yeah, that's what we practice on. I said, it's a 4-lane track, a little miniature track. He said, that's right. How do your kids get over there? Well, we have to bus them, or they walk 2 blocks to practice. You're kidding me. What do you do about home track meets? We don't have any. I could not believe it. Northeastern, this is Elizabeth City now, 6 lanes. Here's where I didn't understand what I was seeing. I looked at 71st and it didn't have any lanes and it was brown. I looked at Jack Britt and it didn't have any lanes and it was brown. I looked at Douglas Bird, and all these are federal schools. It didn't have any lanes and it was brown. It's because it was dirt. So I asked him, I said, where do y'all practice? We practice on the dirt. 6 lanes on the dirt. Yes. You had any complaints? None. Well, where do you go if you acclimate the kids to cleats? Well, we got a little old middle school over here that was a high school a long time ago. Its name is Reed Ross, and they've got a track over there. And we first come, first serve, and I've got a key to the gate. If they want to go over there, they can. So you're telling me if 2 or 3 teams want to go over and practice on a given day, they're all over there together? Well, yeah, but they really prefer to practice on the dirt. Are you going to change that? Well, yeah, Mr. Farmer. Need to tell you this. We've just got a huge grant and some money, and we're going to now pave the 6 or 7 remaining tracks that we have down here in Federal. I said, well, God bless you. That's great. I went on to Clinton High School, 6th. And then the shock of my life, Lee County, which is in Sanford, which is a 3A school, been there forever. 5 lanes. That's all they've got. Now, I know this muddies the water, and I'm sorry for doing that. But as I talk to more and more people, I found out that the schools that have 6-lane tracks are going to keep their 6-lane tracks. When they refurbish them, they're not going to 8-lane tracks. And here's 2 counties that have the opportunity to do that, and they're not going to do that because they've had no complaints across the board. And in each one of these counties, they have at least one really nice facility. Now, did you hear me? I didn't say a larger facility, but a nicer facility. And it's just like Rocky Mountain. When I talked to the athletic director over there, I said, well, suppose there's a huge event, a super regional. Well, they've all got the option to come to Rocky Mountain. Same with Greenville Rose at Pitt County. They said they can come over there. So they're coming for more lanes, right? No, they're coming because they're brand new facilities and people want to run on a brand new track. I said, okay, I understand that completely. Now, I had a long talk with the people at Wilson Times about the Times Classic every year. I'll talk a little bit more about that, but they told me about James Ward because they didn't understand how regionals were picked. And evidently this guy who used to be at Beddingfield a long time ago, he now is at Wakefield. He is the go-to person for Q to pick the regionals. And he told the Wilson Times, the editor there for sports, it has nothing to do with 6 lanes or 8 lanes at all in Eastern North Carolina. It first is about a safe facility. Second is about a person that knows what the heck he's doing, because obviously, and I've done it, and on a very small level, But for a big invitational, and they have anywhere from, well, it depends. An invitational could go 8, 10, but anything over 4 is basically called an invitation. You got your dual meets, you got your tri meets, you got your quad meets, and anything over 4, it gets to be very, very complicated. So you got to have a person that really knows what he's doing. So somebody may want an event because they've got 8 lanes, but if they don't have a person with expertise, they don't have a facility, they don't have the manpower, and this was new to me, and they don't have the timing system. What is that? Because all we used to use was stopwatches. No, Gary, there are timing systems now that makes this a whole lot easier. In fact, you get that and you get the software with it, and it's all laser and it's got cameras, and it only costs about $5,500. Then, hey, we're always looking for somebody that's got that. We want the seating, we want the concession, we want the parking, and the money goes where in the regionals? Half of it comes right off the top and goes to the North Carolina High School Athletic Association. I said, oh, okay. So is a lot of money to be made? No. Okay, it's now if it's a conference meet, they've got standard prices on the conference meeting. And the only reason they have that is not to make money, is because if somebody is feeling benevolent and they don't want to charge anything, and then the fans go over to another meet and it's $6 or $7, then they get real upset. So the conferences usually have a standard price that they charge. And mostly with your dual meets, your tri meets, your quad meets, basically it's the parents of the kids that are running. Now, there may be some more money involved in a super regional, but never at a state track meet, because that's always going to be held at a college, and it's going to be held by the North Carolina High School Athletic Association. I also tried to call one more person, and I know you're going to laugh. You're going to sit here and say, what is he talking about? But I tried every way from Sunday to get up with Nicholas Sparks. Nicholas Sparks is the same guy that writes all these love books and the Notebook and Message in a Bottle and all that. Well, what's he got to do with this conversation, Gary? He's got a lot to do with this conversation, y'all. He is a track guru. He set records at Notre Dame that have not been broken yet. He decided to build a home and live in the community of Newbern. He went down, because he's such a track fanatic, to Newbern High School, and he knew his son would be coming there later. And he said, folks, this is unacceptable. They said, we just don't have money. I'm sorry, sir. He said, here's a $900,000 check. You build a state-of-the-art facility. And they did. And he went back and said, can I be an assistant volunteer? And what are they going to say? Yes, you can. So what did they do? They went out promptly and won several state championships. I wanted to ask him if he had any input into how we could approach this and his feelings about this. Well, as luck would have it, I couldn't get past the publicist, because he's got a brand new book coming out Wednesday, and he starts his tour Wednesday, and his first stop is in Books A Million in Newbern, and I would have to go down and buy a book, and I'd have to wait in line to talk to him about track. And I told the publicist, I'm sorry, my meeting's Monday. If it had been Thursday, I probably would have done that. Now, another thing that was said, that if we have a 6-lane track, it will only become a practice facility. I'm going to tell you something, folks. Every person I talked to, every coach and every athletic director took exception to that statement. They told me, quote, unquote, that is a coach's practice management situation. It's like one of the architects said a while ago, you've got 12 running events. You've got 6 field events. You've got 100-meter dash, 200-meter dash, 400-meter dash, 800-meter run, 1,600-meter run, 3,200-meter run, 110-meter hurdles, 300-meter hurdles, 4x100-meter relay, 4x200-meter relay, 4x400-meter relay, and 4x800-meter relay. You break that down and it's like football. The linemen don't work and they don't drill with the cornerbacks. And the cornerbacks don't drill with the running backs. And the running backs don't drill with the defensive backs. Each have got a different set of skills. The sprinters will be working together on one part of the track. The runners, long distance, medium, they'll be working probably on the outside lanes of the track. The hurdle people will be working on the back side of the track opposite of where the sprinters are. And the relay people will be working in their transition boxes. But track is just like weightlifting. You don't do the same thing every day or you burned out before you get to your track meet. So what you do is you alternate your practice days on what you're doing. Now, you've got 6 events that have nothing at all to do with that running track. You've got the high jump, you've got the pole vault, you've got the long jump, you've got the triple jump, you've got the shot put, and you've got the distance. They've got their own separate areas and it has nothing whatsoever to do with the running track. Now, the Wilson Times Classic, the first 5 years it was held at Beddingfield. It was, Beddingfield, of course, is 6 lanes. They didn't move it because they wanted a larger track. They moved it because Beddingfield was in disrepair and was not safe. So where did they move it? They moved it to Southern Nash. What is Southern Nash? Another 6-lane track. That's 11 years worth of the Wilson Classic that's been held at a 6-lane track. They've run 8 to 10 teams. No money goes to the Wilson Times, not 1 penny. I was told that they absolutely lose money. The Wilson Times do, and they actually pay the director $100 to run it. Now, whoever's hosting it, they can charge what they want. Whoever's running the concession stand, they can charge what they want. They recommended to the teams that no money be charged to enter in because they wanted everybody to see. Of course, that did not happen. And different schools did charge money. Now, I was told by the people at the Wilson Times that Fike had one of the finest tracks around. But the problem is nobody wants to run the Wilson Times Classic anymore. It is a lot of work. It takes 6 to 8 hours to run that event. And you got people everywhere and you got events going on everywhere. And so the only group that's interested now in it, and he's got the expertise and he's got the timing, and they've gone there the last 2 years and supposed to have been there this year, was Nash Central. So I just want you to know that I was told, quote, unquote, that if Fike or Beddingfield with a 6-lane or 8-lane or Hunt with a 6-lane or 8-lane had the equipment, had the expertise, had the manpower, had the timing, and wanted it, it would never leave Wilson County, that Wilson County would become the mecca of track in eastern North Carolina. Now, another thing was said about the facilities, Wilson Prep versus Wilson County. And I had not been out there to see their facilities. You all know I do eye screening all over the county, so I'm very familiar with Mr. Woodard. I know all the people out there. We go out there and we work with them. So I said to myself after I read that, I've got to see this. So I went out there and knocked on the door, and they said, Mr. Woodard is in a senior staff meeting. Who are you? I said, I'm Gary Farmer. I'm Wilson County Schools, and I just come out here to talk to him a little bit. So he called Mr. Woodard. Mr. Woodard said, send him down right now. I said, oh, I don't want to break into your meeting. Come on in here. You're among family. So I went into his senior staff, and we all greeted one another, and I knew most of them. And he said, why are you here? I said, well, I don't know if you read the article in the paper, but I understand we're losing an awful lot of kids to you because you've got some of the finest facilities in Eastern North Carolina, and I just hadn't seen them yet. He said, well, yeah, what did you say? I said, well, I was told that we lost 400 and some kids, and it's because you got great facilities. I'm going to tell you no story. This is no story. There was laughter in the room. And they said, you mean our education's not better? I said, well, I'm sure it is, but I'm just reading what I read. Said, okay, let me get Mr. Ward. So he called a fellow named Mr. Ward. Mr. Ward is their track coach. He said, take Gary Farmer wherever he wants to go and let him ask any question he wants to ask and answer it. I said, thank you, Mr. Woodard. I appreciate it. They were so nice to me. So Mr. Ward, who was the track coach, took me out. And Lord have mercy, they've got a beautiful 8-lane track. It is absolutely gorgeous. And so I said, do you have any bleachers? I don't see any bleachers. Well, no, we don't have any bleachers. I said, well, do you have any things for the kids to sit on? Do you have concession stands? Do you have a press box? Do you have tennis courts? Well, no. Do you have a softball field? Don't you have Title IX? I mean, you got a baseball field. You ain't got any lights on it at all, but you do have lights on your football combination, soccer field, track. Well, no, we hope to one day. So no softball field, no tennis courts, no practice fields of any kind, no bleachers, no field house, no outdoor bathrooms, no concession stands, no press box, no lights for the baseball field. I said, wow, y'all do have a beautiful track, though. I must admit, this is really nice. So then I went back to the house and I read that thing again, and it didn't say they had the greatest track. It said they had the best facilities, and people are leaving because of the facilities. So I went back and I said, I saw your outdoor facilities, but I didn't see your indoor facilities. Mr. Ward, take Mr. Farmer through our indoor facilities. Okay. They got an adequate gymnasium. They got bleachers just on one side. On the other side, between the sideline and the wall, is about 8 foot. They have no wrestling rooms, no mats, no sports medicine room, no dedicated weight room. So here again, that's all a part of facilities. Now, how can we save money, and how can we make this happen, and how can we get the very best? Obviously, the county commissioners, they can make it all happen, and it'll be wonderful. And I'm going to be right there singing their praises, just like we did the other day when we voted for them as county commissioners of the year. They earn it, and they have been wonderful to us. But I've said it from day one. The first question I asked, and it's on record, do we have any more money than the $2 million? And the answer was no. Okay, fine. Maybe we're going to get some more money, but hey, we can make this happen with the 8 lanes if we do away with the lights. But the lights are mandated, Gary. I can't believe they're mandated. Called Q Cucker back. Said, Q, this makes no sense at all. Why are we going to do that for safety reasons? We can save $400,000 and we can get some more things. And a lot of these 1A schools and 2A schools, they're not going to be able to spend that kind of money. And when I asked Ron Butler at Greenville, are you going to change your lights? No. When I asked Nash County, their athletic director, are you going to change your lights? No. Do you have LED lights? No. I asked the same thing of Cumberland County, I asked the same thing of New Hanover. No, they're not gonna touch them. I said, I can understand it, Q. I can understand it because Musco is a corporate sponsor. And you gotta be good to your corporate sponsors. But hey, they're a corporate sponsor in every state in the union. They're making enough money. We've got the layout here of they've taken the candle power to show us how our field is lighting. And we've got two little places at Hunt and one little place at Beddingfield where it's not adequate. And that's in the corner of the end zones. Do we need to do that? She said, no. I said, I didn't hear you. She said, no, that was only meant for safety reasons. You call this person, her name is Nina Mealy, and she will come out and she's got a checklist and she'll tell you where you fall short if you do, and she'll work with you every way she can. So you're not telling me that we need the newest cluster of LED lights to meet your standards? No, you do not. I said, oh, I understand. So I called the athletic director over at Nash County and I said, are y'all gonna, no, do you know this person? Yeah, she's a good friend of mine. Well, are you gonna put in we don't have Musco lights in Nash County. It's too expensive. I said, oh, okay. So you see where I'm going with this? That's $400,000 right there. And so what? We may need a few more lights up there. Maybe we need some standards. I don't know. But I'll tell you something else. We're in a hurricane-prone area. And the first hurricane that comes along over 100 miles an hour, we're going to replace the light standards anyway. I hope not poles, but they will mess those things up. And we can turn right around and ask for insurance, and we can put those LED light clusters up if that's the case. But if we want these lanes here, there's $400,000 that we can save right there. Julie Cochran, I think it's absolutely worthy of a look of having 8 sprint lanes and 6 all the way around. We don't have to move anything if that's the case, if the architects can figure that out, and I'm sure they can. Now, the only reason they want a safety check is there was a kid in Georgia that went back going to make a spectacular catch against the fence in baseball, touched the fence and was electrocuted dead. That's the only reason that they're asking us to look at our lights to make sure everything is safe. Now, I'm tickled to death. We're going to do something with our baseball lights. There's a huge difference in a ball that's being thrown 80 miles an hour, because I don't think there's any kids that can throw it 90 miles an hour. But if you come in head high with a fastball and the kid can't see it at home plate because the lighting is not there and he gets hit in the head, then we've got a serious situation. So I'm all for doing anything you need to do at baseball. And then also, there's a new thing that just came out, this Pixelot. You know, maybe the lights are needed if we're going to install Pixelot cameras in both places, Beddingfield and Hunt, on the football fields. Maybe the lighting would be clearer for the television cameras and the streaming, and maybe that would be nice. But that's $400,000 nice. So I'm going to wind this up, and I'm going to say again, thank you. Thank you, county commissioners. Thank you guys for listening to me. Thank you, architects, for trying to make this happen. I can't go forward without saying we do have ADA issues we've got to deal with. We've just got new title line, a whole wad of new regs we've got to deal with. And as one athletic director told me, said, Gary, I know that area very well. And the big thing that we're working on now across the state is team exit egress. I said, what is that? I said, well, it's going to cost you some money, but we're having situations, and we had a bad situation 2 years ago where the kids have played the game, they're highly charged, they're emotional, the fans are emotional. We all leave the stadium at one time. It's just a recipe for disaster. I was told by the athletic director over in Nash County, a gun was even found after one of the games. So what they're recommending, and it's going to cost us money, there needs to be a way for the fans to leave, the visiting team to go another way, and the home team to go another way. Now, that can be done on a time basis, or it can be done with portable fencing, but we're going to have to deal with that. So let's rejoice, and whatever we decide, there is no losers here in Wilson County, because this is very, very exciting time for athletics and sports. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Farmer. I don't know. I said you were quiet, but that response took away my feeling that you're quiet. I should have known that with your athletic background that we'd hear a little more. But thank you for all of your comments that were shared. Members of the board, do others have comments that you would like to make? Ms. Boyette, Mr. Breen.
Madam Chair, just very briefly.
All right.
I apparently didn't do the homework. I didn't make any phone calls. I read the newspaper article and I looked at the spreadsheet. And the only number that matters to me is 1.5 million. My thought is if we approve a plan for 8 lanes and send it to the county commissioners, they're either going to say, here's some more money, which essentially is what they said in the newspaper, to do the 8 lanes. And if they say, no, we're not going to give you 1.5, we can always punt back to 6. I don't see there being any issue with approving an 8-lane proposal. And the county commissioners are either going to do what they said and indicated they're going to do, or they're not. And if they decide not to, then we go back to our original plan.
All right. Ms. Boyette?
Thank you, Mr. Breen. I would agree with you. In July, when CPL, the experts, gave us the options, the 4 options, you may remember that we looked at option 1 and option 2, but we were stopped after option 2. We never even looked at option 3 and option 4 that had the 8 lanes, and we didn't make it to the part of their presentation that explained the lights. So we didn't ever get a full explanation of what our opportunities were there. We've talked to our principals, our athletic directors, our community, and in Wilson County, they want 8 lanes. So the county commissioners have asked us to come to them with what 8 lanes are going to cost us. We need to be fair at all our high schools. Fife High School has 8 lanes. And as one of the commissioners said, our students deserve it. Why build 4 lanes if you need 6? We want to do it right, and we want it to have equal access. So yes, I agree, we need to go with 8 lanes.
Dr. Mills?
The board members, I mentioned earlier, I was going to share some information. I did have a conversation with Ms. Steineagle last week to share some preliminary information with her after I'd sent the information out to you as we were scheduling this. And I talked to her today. I'd share with her the spreadsheet that I've been working on. And at that time, I had some information there that Dave and his staff were saying it was too far extrapolated about the 6 and 8 lane tracks. And so I pulled that out today because what you saw earlier was the information right from the presentation. But when I share with her the conversations the board have been having, and then some of the cost estimates we were looking at, she did have some conversation with some of the commissioners informally And they have been supportive of additional funds beyond the 2 million for us to have a track facility that would serve the purposes of our students at the high schools. You know, we just shared the information about the land use study and the forecast enrollment. You can see our high schools are stable over time. Now, the thing I can't say is how much that will be exactly, because I cannot speak for anybody else, but it was enough additional funding, closer to an extra million, is what kind of informal conversation they've had. The difference is between the 6 and the 8 is those numbers are a little bit different because you've got some additional projects in there as well too. So I would point out that she was kind enough to reach out and share and touch base. Unfortunately, some of the numbers I shared with her were too far from the norm from how we try to work out the numbers for a 6 and 8 lane minimum contract. So that's why we talked with David and his staff on Friday. But I did want to add that to the conversation because I did reach out and share and touch base. So there was support for additional funding. Now, whether we reach what you're looking at on the screen with one flat fee of 8 lane full versus 6 lane full, I don't know, but that might be a conversation you want to have. But again, you're still back to discussing and determining what you want. I mean, but I do think they were very supportive of that conversation. And I just think that was something I wanted to share with you as we got going in this discussion. So,
Mrs. Barnes, Mrs. Powell, do you have
This-
questions or comments?
This is Velma. I want to thank Gary, first of all, for all of the research that he did. That was just phenomenal information. And as he said, and I agree with what has been said so far, the county commissioners, in my opinion, hold the purse strings. And if there has been some informal discussion about allocating funds, it would be hard to vote if we don't know what those informal funds may be. If the funding is there, 8 lanes for sure. If the funding is not there, then we have to be good stewards of what we have, period.
Mrs. Powell, and then I haven't forgotten you, Mr. Mercer.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
sitting here thinking about the ADA accessibility of our tracks to thinking that, you know, that would be something that needs to be done also, so we can allow our handicapped individuals to also be able to come in a safe setting, come and view our meets and our games. And I would love to definitely have our schools upgraded. I'd love to have our buildings upgraded. I would love to do that, most definitely. And I think the money was the issue in the very beginning, and then thinking that the county commissioners are giving up their time, thankfully, thanking God that they're allowing us to give us money to actually be able to do that, to have the 8 tracks versus the 6, because in the beginning I was okay with the 6 because they said, you know, we can do what we can on 6 tracks, and then high school has 8 tracks, so we can actually have our meets over there if we need the 8 tracks. It's funny, I asked my daughter just the other day, because my daughter ran track when she was at Fife. And I told her, I said, did you notice that there were 8 tracks at Fife? She said, oh, I really didn't even notice. But that's because she already had 8 tracks. So I understood that. But, you know, I guess to just make a long story short, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, but if the county commissioners are so graciously willing to give us the money to have the 8 tracks, it would behoove us to allow them to do for us, because that saves us a lot of money. I do thank Gary for that wonderful summer he gave with all the schools. I was unaware of what each school had, but that allows me now to be aware where we are, you know, considering to them based on the other schools in the other counties. But I'm thinking that, you know, I think it would definitely be wrong of us to say no to the county commissioners when they're offering money for us to do this.
Madam Chair, I have one other question before you go to Mr. Mercer. This is Velma Barnes.
Yes.
In the grand totals, does that include the ADA requirements as well?
I don't believe it does, Ms. Barnes.
Excuse me? What'd you
I don't
say?
believe it does include what we would have to do in the stands and other areas unless Dave has other information. I don't believe that's the part of the process.
You're correct, Dr. Mills. That money does not include the ADA assessments we would need for the buildings and walkways and the stands.
As a follow-up, then, do we know what the cost factor for that would possibly be?
I couldn't tell you that right off the top of my head. I know that David and his staff looked at some things while we were out there, and Mr. Ledgeworth and his staff looked at some things, but I wouldn't feel comfortable going through a whole lot of that till we walk back through, because some of the stands and other pieces would need to be spec'd and get some estimates on some things like that, but.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Farmer, I think we were gonna let Mr. Mercer.
I'll yield to Mr. Farmer. He's gonna be brief this time.
very brief, I promise.
He said, hopefully.
I hear you, Dr. Mills. I do want to tell you guys, and I hate to report this, I did walk the track today at Fike High School because I was alerted to a problem at Fike High School, and I wanted to see it myself, and I did. I was told in any large track meet at Fike High School, they do not have 8 lanes of track. They only have 7 lanes of track. In the Wilson Classic, they can only run 7 lanes at a time. And the reason being, whoever the architects were set up the long jump pit so that the run-up track was the 8th lane of the running track. So if you've got girls jumping on the long jump, then you can't run but 7 lanes because you would interfere with them using one of the lanes as a run-up. Now, you could tell them to stop, which they would grow cold and they would have to re-energize and they would have to exercise and they would have to warm the muscles up, and you could have some injuries. We could ask them to stop so we could run 8 lanes, but that's just wrong. And then I was told, and this has got a lot to do, and I'm glad you brought it up, Deborah, I was told that having the Special Olympics at Hunt High School was a lawsuit getting ready to happen because of the accessibility and ADA issues at Hunt High School. Also, we have not addressed, when they have the Wilson Times Classic or they have a large invitational, they have to borrow every hurdle in the county because they don't have enough hurdles. And they go to the School for the Deaf and they borrow hurdles from them. They also don't have timing equipment, and it's only $5,500 for state-of-the-art timing equipment. And I've got all the prices on that. And then they don't have the shelters that we talked about to put all this nice pads and equipment in. So that's extra expense that we're looking at.
Thank you very much, Mr. Palmer. Mr. Mercer,
I think that was relatively brief.
relatively, yes.
Mr. Farmer, I too appreciate all the time you spent in researching and getting that information. It was most helpful. I too appreciate the county commissioners. They've been very kind to us. I think without a doubt, from talking with other board members across the state at meetings in the past, we have a far better relationship and working especially working relationship than most, if not all. The questions I have is that, I could have told you that if you go to each school, they want 8 lanes, because, I mean, if you asked me at my school, I'd say I want 8 lanes because that's good. I think it's kind of like the cream on it. It's, it makes it really nice and it's good, and I'm not opposed to it. But if you're thinking of having meets, and anybody, Mr. Tillman's here and Mr. Farmer, correct me if I'm wrong, at Fike and at Beddingfield, athletes don't have a bathroom to go to other than the public bathrooms or the main building. As Mr. Farmer, Mr. Tillman, is that the case?
Yes.
Okay. I can't see having a meet out of school and you're going to have to use the public restrooms for the athletes and that going over. So in that case, we need whatever accommodations you need. If it's a field house or whatever, that would be good to have if you're talking about good facilities. And I don't see us having a lot of revenue from it, but then again, that's a given. We will have just as much as any of the other schools. Well, also the bleachers, the facilities, in its entirety to me. But you know, I'm kind of at a quandary though, aside from all of this and all that's been said. We've been talking about this for 4 months and we're in no better place right now than we were 4 months ago, except the information that we've gathered as far as making a decision. And I'm wondering, how have we gone in circles? I mean, it's, I just don't understand that. I mean, I thought we'd made a decision, to be honest with you.
All right. Very interesting points being made by all parties concerned. What is your pleasure at this point? This was marked for discussion, for information, discussion, and action. For all
Madam
three.
Chairman,
Mr. Farmer?
I feel like Mr. Breen has got it right on the money. I don't know that we've got the answer because we don't hold the purse strings. If they are willing to pony up that kind of money in light of this pandemic and all the needs in this town of Wilson and this county of Wilson, then that is their decision completely. And I don't know that that buck stops with us. Because when the people start asking questions, they need to answer that, not us. We did our job and we did it very well.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Powell?
can we add the ADA accessibility, or is that something that we need to look at later because of the fact of what Mr. Farmer said? I really don't want to suit with us having the Olympics at high school, having any issues or problems, because that can actually cause problems and we're not fully accessible to our handicapped population. So that may be something that we may need to look at also. I don't know, I know there's a plan here in place and I don't want to hold up the plan any longer than it's already being held up. It's making this decision of 6 to 8 lanes. But that is a question that, like I said earlier, that I've had, and I still remain, still have that same question.
You did indeed have that question. Mrs. Boyette also raised the issue of ADA. When the architects first presented information to us, it was indicated that what they were projecting did not include ADA accessibility. And in the figures that have been cited now, it still does not include ADA. We did have, and they did point out information about facilities on the grounds of each of the schools in terms of gutters or no gutters, and the buildings themselves for both concession and what is used as the restroom facilities. So the dollars that are listed here are strictly for those tracks. And as the county commissioners are looking at added dollars, if we are asking for ADA compliance and accountability, the dollars that they are looking at is not included in what they are thinking of granting us as extra funding in order to be able to move, because their discussion was in moving us to an 8-lane track. And I think that there are other hidden costs. If the architects can tell me if the lighting, because when you look at that 8-lane track, those lighting poles that are metal on pads, concrete pads that would have to be moved in order to accommodate for the spread of the track. And they have a lighting cost in the spreadsheet that Dr. Mills provided to us. But is that the cost of taking down those poles and then putting up new poles and pads? I think that there's still some hidden costs that may not have been considered when you're looking at, and certainly ADA was not factored in that for any potential additional funding from the county commissioners. So with the lighting that's already there that would have to be moved to accommodate for 8-lane track, is that what the lights and the poles are including in their figure? Or is this just the upgrade to be the recommendation of Musco?
In our discussions, in architects, we have asked them that information. The 8-lane track would require us to move the lights anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
How about the bleachers?
the bleachers, now again, when CPO came down, they took a look at the bleachers on the visitor side and home side, some of our restrooms and things like that, but that was not a part of this estimate.
Right.
Because this was about the tracks. And again, I'll point out, I'm more than happy to go back and reach out to Ms. Steinhagen and talk about the 6 versus 8 as you have them now, because the information we had discussed informally last week was inaccurate because of how I had extrapolated out and talking with Mr. Alder. So, I mean, I do know that they've offered additional funds beyond the $2 million that will allow us to do this right here in terms of the 6-lane track, but they did talk about the 8-lane track. So I don't think there's, from my point of view, I'm more than willing to reach out and share that this is what we have right now. But I do think you start talking about any issues with ADA, then there's a lot more groundwork that has to be done to be completely covered in that area to do the detail work we need to do. Because we walked the grounds a couple times and looked at the engineering of the stands and things such as that. So you're talking about a more comprehensive view of things as we go. But I do think the sentiment that was coming back from Ms. Steinhagen today, again, was commissioners are very supportive of us having some monies to do what we think we need to do for tracks. So I would suggest if this is what the board wants, then I can go back and share that. Because I know that they've shared some information that the additional funds would cover the 6-lane track law details in our additional projects, but again, I didn't have complete information until after Friday. So that was all informal. So commissioners meeting coming up, and I think, I'll be more than willing to do that for the board. I just need to know direction-wise what you're interested in.
But I understand about the bleachers being separate, but if we add the lanes, will we have to move the bleachers?
No, we talked to David, you want to talk about that? We looked at that too with David and them in terms of safety and if we needed to do that.
Yeah, well, given where we are right now, with at least preliminary design, we feel that the bleachers, as they're shown right now, we can fit 8 lanes within their current parameter and not have to move the bleachers at this point. Really, the issue with the bleachers really just came down to, one is betting field, the structural integrity of one of the bleachers, the visitors' bleachers was not great. And, the structural engineer came and looked at it, gave some recommendations there. And then the other bleachers, there's some issues with some accessibility on the bleachers, that we can look at. But, one of the reasons we didn't get into doing more than just kind of a preliminary assessment of the ADA was just that the budget given for the preliminary budget was, too small to really accommodate any sort of ADA upgrades.
All right.
That certainly, can be vetted and there can be estimates done for all the ADA assessment work. And inside the report, if everybody kind of looks, there is like a 4th option for both schools that at least addresses the ADA, the major ADA concerns for each one of those campuses in the athletic areas. There's not estimates, but there is kind of a discussion about it.
So what is the pleasure of the board? I think that's where we currently are. Because there are 2 things in front of us. There's 6 lane, there's 8 lane.
Well, we've already agreed on 6 lanes.
Correct.
And before, matter of fact, a couple of times, but I don't think in good conscience with someone interested in helping with something that we can just say thank you, but no thank you. I don't think that would be proper at all. But I do think that if we take action or no action for us saying this is what we want, before we say what we want, we need to find out what we can get. So if the information is shared with the commissioners as to what the price tag is, it would be like Mr. Breen said, then we get feedback and we can talk about it more. But if we say, yes, we want 8 lanes, and then they say, well, we just don't have the money, we're right back in another circle.
Mm-hmm.
And it's becoming disturbing to me that we're taking action and then waking up and saying, no, that's not going to work at all. We got to go back again. And that bothers me. So I don't even want to take an action as far as 6 or 8 myself. I'd like to get feedback and find out what we're allowed to do or have the money to do.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Breen?
wouldn't it be possible to make a motion that we take action conditional on the receipt of additional funds from the county commissioners? Maybe that's a question for Brandon.
I think that's a question, but yes, Mr.
Yeah.
Green, you can make a conditional motion that pending substantial funding.
Yeah.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Now, it may require the board to revisit the topic in the event the funds don't come through. But in the event they do come through, your condition is met and then your motion is valid.
Well, under circumstance, if extra funding does not come through, we have already taken action to be a 6 lane. So that would be a moot point of having to come back and have a discussion again, I would think.
Yeah, then we wouldn't have to have a
Unless-
third meeting.
Unless there's some discussion needs to be had about the ADA compliance issues. There has been some interest in that. That was the only reason I would consider revisiting.
But it would not have to be revisited as to the number of lanes because the
No,
lane
ma'am.
number
No, ma'am,
had
it would
already
not be.
been decided on, as Mr. Mercer has indicated twice.
Yes, it has been voted on twice by this board.
Madam Chairman,
Mr. Farmer?
I would love for the county commissioners to hear the entire story. And I would love for them to hear the facts. I would love for them to take the emotion out of this decision completely, and then they make the decision on what they won't, because we've already made that decision twice with the parameters they gave us. If the goalposts have shifted, if the game rules have changed, then so be it. I'm excited, but I'm like Mr. Breen. It's not our call anymore. They took that out of our hands. Any decision we make is a moot decision because they, in their mind, think they have enough information to make a qualified decision.
Members of the board, the suggestion is to send it back to the county commissioners, let them decide as to whether or not they're going to give the added funding, and then depending on what their response is, yay or no, then we already have a decision that we would proceed with, and we still would have to at a later point or sometimes deal with the ADA issue, but the number of lanes for the track would be decided. Is that the direction that you would like to have us to move in? To find out an absolute from the county commissioners as to whether or not they would definitely be giving us additional funding or not.
Well, I don't see how they can make a decision really until they know the amount that they're talking about.
Well, whatever necessary information that they need so that they can make their decision.
I agree.
We
I think it needs to be more
we worked within the constraints that we were given initially. And so now they wanted us to have more discussion. We have been having more discussion, but I think there may be more information that is needed to be shared with them so that they can make a definitive response to us.
Madam Chair,
Mrs. Boyette?
I'm gonna make a two-part motion. First of all, I'm going to move that we go forward to replace what is listed on that spreadsheet as the mandatory lights at Pike High School. That I'm moving that we move forward to take action to approve the mandatory lights at Pike that are listed on the spreadsheet. And the second part is that we receive a value judged 8-lane track proposal with ADA requirements and present that to the county commissioners for funding.
Now, I need to hear the second portion of that again, Mrs. Boyette.
That we get an 8-lane value judged price, including ADA, meeting those requirements, and present that to the county commissioners.
Second.
Excuse me, what is a value? I don't understand that.
Value judged means that you look back at the proposal and value what must be there and what is not. I assume that that is what was done to the 6-lane track when Dr. Fitch directed them to go back and get 2 for 1.3.
When I directed them to go back for what?
To get the 2 6-lane tracks down to 1.3 million. Is that correct, CPL?
No, they knew what we were looking at. When we started out, it was a $2 million commitment from the county commissioners for our facilities. We dealt with the paving at Beddingfield. And what was the other, Dr. Mills?
We talked about the lights for the baseball field, talked about tennis courts.
But when we spent the money out of the 2 million, we were left with 1.3 million. And that was what we were working within to be the stewards of, because that was what was left from the projects. So,
When they gave us the options
yes,
and we looked at them and you directed them to go back and look at the 6-track option and bring it in at 1.3.
well, that was not what I directed. It was what the board directed, because the board
Okay.
voted on 6 lanes. So it was not a Dr. Fitch decision to do that. It was what the board directed, that we go with a 6-lane option. And we asked them to be the good stewards of working within our budget.
Okay, but I'm defining what value judged is when you told them to look back at the 6-lane track and reduce the amount so that we could get it at 1.3. I believe that is value judging what was in there, seeing what could be reduced.
Okay, but I think when they gave us their estimates and their findings, they never included ADA. You introduced ADA by saying you and others sit on the track because there were issues with bleachers, and that you all watched the events on the football field. You all sat in the lanes of the track, because the ADA compliance had never come up until you said, and you know that there are some issues with ADA because there are people who cannot ascend the steps. And some of us who sit on the bleachers, sit on the track when we watch the football games, because the initial directive to the architects was in relation to how can they fix the lanes, particularly at Hunt, because it had that drop off, and that there was the safety concern because of that drop off. So then ADA became a portion of, they looked at it and they said, here are some overall issues, but with the funds that you have available, we will not be able to cover ADA. I think they shared that with us early in the presentation.
Yes,
That
ma'am.
here are the lanes, here are 6-lane options, here are 8-lane options, there are ADA issues. Here are some simple things you can do to help with the situation, because they talked about struts being missing there. If I'm and architects, if I'm incorrect, I may be using the wrong nomenclature. You can oil, or you can treat some of these nuts and bolts, and you can do some other things with, and Mr. Letchworth, you helped me as well, some other things with some supports. Here are some issues that we have found with the bathrooms, with the overhangs, with the various and sundry components. They pointed all of those out to us, but their discussion was that we are looking at the tracks, and we had said, well, let's first of all get away from all of the fancy colors, because the basic colors were cost effective, the black or the red. So, because it was like a shooting match and saying, let's go for everything that we want. If we want the colors of each individual school, where that was going to put, so we said, no, let's not do that. And so we gave them parameters, and they worked within the parameters. They came back to us with the 6-lane estimates and cost. And we had already decided in May we would go with a 6-lane track. And then after they brought us all of the particulars, we stayed with 6. And then afterwards, and at one of our most recent meetings, it was where you indicated your issues with why should we settle for a 6-lane track when we need to be going for 8-lane, and the facilities at other places was what was drawing away our student population, and that when people moved to town, they wanted to know about athletic facilities. And I think that is what drove Mr. Farmer and to go to Wilson Prep. But ADA was never in the overall scheme of things. They were generous enough to share with us their findings where we were in terms of ADA. But now that we know that ADA is on the table, I don't think we would be good stewards of whatever funding they give us extra. If they give us any extra, that we need to be investing in 2 more lanes of track when we need to be looking at the safety of our public who's going to be in our bleachers at the facilities that we are trying to improve.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I would offer a friendly amendment to Ms. Boyette's motion. The second part of Ms. Boyette's motion.
Okay. First of all, I did have a second, if I believe.
Yeah.
Did I hear a second from, was that Mrs. Powell?
Yes, you did.
Okay. Let me first restate the motion before you offer the friendly amendment, sir. And if I'm misstating your motion, please let me know. It has been moved by Mrs. Boyette, seconded by Mrs. Powell, that we go forward to approve mandatory lights as listed on the spreadsheet presented by the administration, and that we get an 8-lane value judged price with ADA requirements.
Yes, and let me clarify so I know what I want is us to have an 8-lane, what it will cost to have 8 lanes and to make those in addition, the ADA requirements so that we can present to the county commissioners, this is what we need for 8 lanes and to make those ADA requirements to meet that, to make it safe so that they know clearly this is what the 8 lanes, the ADA requirements, what the price is for that. Let me clarify also, when I'm talking about the spreadsheet, the fight lights are listed, the baseball field lights are listed as mandatory.
Yes.
And so the first part of my motion is that we proceed to fund the fight baseball lights, which are listed as mandatory.
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, that we present to the county commissioners the cost for an 8-lane track and also what would be required to meet the ADA requirements, whether that's, and I'm stopping the motion there. I'm clarifying that whether we have an architect do they have the suggestions, they made those, I saw those. But whether maintenance does them, we're not going with who or saying who would fix those things, but I'm saying that we say, here's what an 8-lane track costs, here's what the ADA meeting our requirements there cost, and that it is value judged. I put that in explanation, not as part of the motion now, just so that value judged, meaning we look at it and see that there aren't things in there that don't have to be, just the things that are most valued to make this a safe, good 8-lane track for our community and our students.
Except your motion originally was to go to the county commissioners and get an 8-lane value judged price with ADA. So that was not to go to the county
Okay, I am
commissioners.
removing the words value judged from my motion. Is that okay with you, Ms. Powell?
So that the motion would then be that we get an 8-lane track with cost and include ADA requirements?
Yes.
See, that's totally different. Okay.
I have a question, Madam Chair, before voting, if that's what we're getting ready to do.
Well, I think we're going to have a friendly amendment.
I think
Madam-
that fixed my friendly amendment.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I believe we need to confirm whether or not Ms. Powell will confirm her second.
I think, Mrs. Powell, did you say that you are in agreement with the language change of the motion made by Mrs. Boyette?
Yes, I'm sorry, I had to unmute. But yes, I do agree with the change that Ms. Leggett did.
Okay. So the friendly amendment is gone.
It's gone. We fixed it.
So let me see if I can restate this motion yet again. It has been moved by Mrs. Boyette, seconded by Mrs. Powell, that we go forward to approve the FIKE mandatory lights as indicated on the superintendent's spreadsheet, and that we get an 8-lane track pricing that also includes ADA requirements to be met. Is that correct? Now, I think Mrs. Barnes had a question.
My question is, how do we vote on an 8-track lane to include ADA requirements when we don't know what the cost factor is? That's very difficult for me.
It's my,
When we make a motion on something, we have to know what the cost factor, and we don't have that yet. So what time frame are we in for making a decision until we know what all the cost factors are?
Well, Mr. Breen had a comment, and then I'll see if,
I take the motion to mean that we're going to essentially put it back to the architects to give us that price. And then once we get that, we present that to the county commissioners and say, this is exactly what we need to do the thing.
well, my question then, let's muddy the waters a little bit more, because we have already decided on a 6-lane track. Why are we limiting the motion to getting an ADA cost requirement only to an 8-lane track?
I think the cost differential essentially remains the same.
I know, but the motion, the way it's stated, is making us look as though we are going to go definitively with an 8-lane track when this board has already decided on a 6-lane track. And so now all her motion does is to say, let's give a cost on an 8-lane. And by the way, let's add the cost of ADA on here to see what it's going to be, which says that you are now just totally wiping away the action that was already taken by this board twice for a 6-lane track.
But the value in getting, and I think this is something we talked about way, when we start talking about 6 versus 8 is, you got an opportunity to get a Rolls Royce or you get an opportunity to get a Lexus. And what we're doing is getting the Rolls price. And if the county commissioners say, we're not going to buy you a Rolls, but we'll happily buy you a Lexus, then we already have those prices. I think that the ADA requirements are getting us up to ADA compliance is, that's going to be a constant amount. The only differential is the 8-lane track. I think what Ms. Boyette's motion does is that, the county commissioners have essentially said, we want to give folks 8 lanes, but that gives them the most full picture of what we're trying to, or what it gives them a full picture of what they are asking us to do with the money that they are trying to give us. Now, if they come back and say you're not getting it, then we still have the plan, and we also have the benefit of having the cost of the ADA requirements being met.
Also, Madam Chair, this is available.
Mm-hmm.
We have now the benefit of all the research. We have all of the information before us. Is it necessary for us to vote tonight before the county commissioners are given all of the accurate information that they need to make a decision on whether or not they will fund 8 tracks versus 6 tracks.
Madam Chairman,
Mr. Farmer,
I'm like Velma. We were asked to go back into discussion. We weren't asked to vote on anything. We have had a great discussion. Now the ball's in their court.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Mercer.
I agree with Mr. Farmer and Ms. Barnes. I could feel comfortable with whichever way we go and be happy with it. If the information is gathered as we've talked about and presented to the county commissioners and some sort of summary of our discussion as to as all the needs, because I personally feel like we've got needs that are every bit as important as 8 lanes, but the county commissioners didn't ask us about that.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know how it was explained to them. So if we have a clear presentation to them on what our interests are, and at the same time, after hearing that, if they say we want to give you the money to do the 8 lanes and the handicap accessible needs for the bleachers, then we'll just go with that. But I would like to have them advised on what we've discussed.
So am I hearing that you
Madam
want?
Chair, excuse me for interrupting. I don't disagree with Ms. Boyette in her motion. Let's find out what it costs and give it to them. But in that process, I would like for them to also get more than just a dollar amount. I'd like for them to get the information that goes with it.
So there's a motion on the floor. But then I'm hearing you say, we just need to really provide the county commissioners with just the facts. I don't know where I am at this point.
I'm sorry.
Mr. McPherson.
We're not yet to calling it for the vote. We're still discussing.
Yes, we are.
I feel like. But again, I'll go back to if depending on how we vote, if we all vote to do this, then we have the ability to present to the county commissioners the facts and what needs to be done.
I think to be fair to them and to us, it needs to be presented officially if it's a summary of this or whatever. I just think that they don't need to do anything blindly no more than we do. And I'm not saying they're blind, because I know that they're interested in the welfare of the students and the facilities and so forth. But they certainly need to be privy to what we've talked about this evening.
Madam Chairman,
Mr. Farmer?
I certainly have no problem repeating what I said before, and I don't think anybody else has any problem repeating what was said before.
Are you meaning,
Which the 40-minute part?
are you meaning in terms of the variations of the lanes and the surfaces and all of that, Mr. Farmer?
And how to save money and what's the norm and what's happening in Eastern North Carolina, straight from the people that are there.
So you're willing
Now,
to
you talked about a Lexus and you talked about a Rolls Royce, but if we can't afford nothing but a Chevrolet, it's kind of, well, I won't go there. I won't go there.
Mr. Farmer, I believe that was your analogy.
That was mine a few months ago.
Mr. Farmer. I apologize, Ms. Barnes, I get you and Mr. Farmer confused.
And I would like to add that CPL have some expertise in this area as well.
Oh, we're not doubting that CPL has expertise in this area as well, because we're hiring them to do the work. So if they didn't have the expertise, they certainly wouldn't be sitting on this call tonight with us, and certainly would not have shared a couple of other calls with us as we have wrangled with this entire issue. So we know that their expertise is there, and we thank them for that expertise that they have been so willing to share with us. So there's a motion on the floor. What are you about to say, Mr. McPherson?
I just want to clarify the motion to make sure it's really clear. So is the intent of the motion to approve the expenditure of the mandatory lights at Fike High School for the baseball field, step one?
Yes.
Step two, to provide an 8-lane track, an ADA compliant dollar figure to the Board of County Commissioners for their review? Is that my understanding, or is it?
The entire proposal, and I hate to interrupt, but that's what it sounded like.
So the entire proposal, so
Yeah.
they see the 6-lane total cost, they see 8-lane total cost?
No, she
Oh,
wants
okay.
only the 8-lane total, the
Okay,
8-lane.
that's why I'm trying to make sure, because what I'm hearing from different board members, I'm just trying to make sure I understood exactly what the motion entailed.
Her motion was for 8-lane along with pricing along with ADA requirements.
Got
The cost for ADA
So at this point,
expenditures.
now we're at the discussion point unless somebody calls the question.
I have a
Okay.
question.
Yes, sir.
It still bothers me to go with them. You can almost write on a card a figure and say, hold it up, this is what it costs. Or they're gonna get additional information on, what the interest of the board and sharing our conversation.
I think they have to be given the full picture.
I mean, I'm just wanting what we vote on to be clear.
What you would be voting on is the mandatory lights at Fike.
I mean, I understand
Okay.
the lights and
And an
8 lanes
8-lane track
and the
and the ADA.
ADA, I understand that. But, is there any information that goes with it or just a dollar amount?
I think the intent of the motion is to send the entirety of the proposal.
Is that the intent of the motion?
No, her intent is the 8-lane and not the 6-lane
Yeah, that's what.
The 8-lane and the
and the ADA.
Yeah.
proposal.
So not the entirety of the proposal. That's what I'm
I
trying.
don't know what entire, what,
6-lane,
That's
6-lane
Mr.
and,
Breen's words. Mr. Breen's words
Sorry.
are the entirety of the proposal.
So, well, Mr. Mercer was wondering if what I'm hearing is correct, is whether or not we're going to hand them a dollar figure, or if we're going to say, this is the amount, and this is 8 lanes plus all the specs that are going to get us to ADA compliance. And it was my understanding that it was the lanes and the compliance. Now, I understand the cost difference between the 6 lanes, but if they get the 8 lanes plus the ADA compliance, you go, whoa, that's too much. ADA compliance and then 6 lanes, I think it's easier to go back to the 6 lanes because we already have that figure prepared for them. Those, in my mind, and architects, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that the ADA compliance portion of it is essentially mutually exclusive to the track. So if they punt us back down and say we can't afford both, then we have the ability to go back and say, after everybody's looked at everything, we can go back to our 6-lane plan if that's what we decide to do, or we can stick with our 8-lane plan plus ADA compliance if they give us the money to do that. But essentially,
I think they have to hear the whole argument and the whole, not argument, but the whole discussion to be, to understand that it does not have to be an 8-lane, that it can be a 6-lane that handles everything and the ADA cost, as well as it can be an 8-lane to spruce it up, to improve it, and the 8-lane cost. But I think that they have to hear all of the particulars and not just give me the 8-lane track and the ADA.
So have we moved past the point of a friendly amendment at this point? Or are we just at the?
No, I wouldn't think we have.
Okay, then I would offer a friendly amendment that the proposal that's sent to the county commissioners include 6 lanes and ADA compliance and 8 lanes and ADA compliance.
As well as the factual information about the lanes in a summary form, lane utilization throughout our conference area or something. Are you looking at that at all, or just here is 6 in ADA and 8 in ADA?
Respectfully, and I appreciate the hard work that Mr. Farmer did, but this is Wilson County. This is Wilson, North Carolina. The only county I care about is Wilson, is Wilson. I don't care what they're doing in Nash. I don't care what they're doing in Edgecombe. I don't care what they're doing in Johnston. What I care about are the citizens and the students in this county. And if we include that, that's great. But to me, that is not a factor in my decision making, because this is our county, and it's ours, to make as best as possible.
Madam Chairman,
Well, hold up, Mr. Palmer. That was a friendly amendment. We have to go back
To the motion maker to see if they accept the friendly amendment.
That's, yes, ma'am.
Could you restate the motion, please?
Well, that's it. All right. Ms. Barnes, if you'll hold on 1 second, we're going to confirm whether or not the motion maker agrees to the friendly amendment that's been offered by Mr. Breen. So, Madam Chair.
Okay. The 6-lane track that we voted on the last time had been altered from the original option 1 on their plan. And some of the things, for example, the one that comes to mind is there was $5,000 proposed for permits and fees on the option 1 on the original package. And whenever they went back and reduced the cost, they took that $5,000 off. That's the only thing that comes to mind right now. But I remember when comparing them, I looked at, and I thought, well, you took $5,000 off, that's raised, that's lowered the amount, but those fees and permits are still going to have to be paid for. So, have you really saved any money there? You've done it on paper. I say that to bring it to this point. Which 6-lane proposal are we talking about, including the one that was reduced by all that amount, including $5,000 for applications and fees, or the original option 1 6-lane proposal?
Okay, I think that question goes back to Mr. Breen, because he's the one who offered the.
Okay, yeah, but do you understand the point I'm making is that there's a lot of difference in option 1 in this packet that we got, 6-lane, and the option that the board voted to,
I would contend the original option 1.
okay.
Because, we're at, the county commissioners have essentially said, just gleaning from the article, artfully written by Ms. Neely and Drew, that they're willing to give us more money. So it's just a matter of how much. So I would go with the original 6-lane proposal, plus the cost of ADA compliance and an 8-lane track proposal, plus the cost of ADA compliance and the summary of Gary's work.
I will agree with a friendly amendment up to the 6 and the 8-lane tracks with ADA compliance.
That's fine.
Madam Chair, I will second if we're
No,
clear.
no. We have to go back to the seconder of the motion, which was Mrs. Powell. We can't take another second right now. We have to go back to Mrs. Powell. The question, Mrs. Powell, is, are you accepting of the friendly amendment made by Mr. Breen and agreed to by the maker of the motion, Mrs. Boyette.
Yes, I do second that. I agree.
Okay. Dr. Mills has a question.
I really don't want to ask anything for fear of
Muddying some
waters.
more?
But just let me ask, since I'll be the one working with architects and our staffs to go to the next step, when the board says ADA compliance, now I'm assuming you mean the stands, the restrooms, are we talking about entrance and exits, field house, restroom facilities? Is comprehensive to that whole stadium? Is that what we're at?
Accessibility.
My amendment was to the things that were noted in the original,
report.
And all,
Stands and things like that.
and
my
all, of-
motion,
and all of that was included in the original.
in the
report,
original, yes, that's what
I'm making sure that's what I thought, but I want to make
yes,
sure.
just what was listed in that
I
original.
got it, okay. Okay. See? It's quick.
That didn't muddy anything.
See?
It clarified.
So
So let's see if I can go back again. It has been moved and properly seconded, moved by Mrs. Boyette, seconded by Mrs. Powell, that we go forward to approve the FIKE mandatory lights as presented on the administration spreadsheet, and that we present to the county commissioner cost or price for 6-lane track with ADA requirement cost and 8-lane track with ADA requirement cost. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is there any further discussion?
I still have the question. Are we going to give them, say, ADM 6-lane will cost X, 8-lane will cost X and quit, or are we going to have
I'm sorry.
accompanying information?
I'm sorry, because part of that motion also was with the summary of information provided by Mr.
That part of the friendly amendment was not.
That
Was not accepted.
That part was not
That was not
accepted.
accepted.
Okay,
We don't want them to know what's going on?
This is a public meeting. They could listen to the audio tape, or read minutes if they're comprehensive.
And we also can be formal and make sure they hear it by delivering it to them. I mean, that's just the way I think it should be. If the board disagrees, that's okay. But
So are you suggesting we give them an audio tape or videotape?
no, ma'am. I'm just saying, when it's presented, they could have a summary of how we arrived at where we arrived. I mean, I'm not asking for an hour presentation, but I think it ought to be more than just numbers given to them.
Well, it's the numbers and the proposal. The county commissioners are a bright, upstanding, august board in and of themselves. I think they are fully capable of doing whatever additional research they need to do. If they feel like they need to hear more, they could always ask for more. Dr. Mills is going to be the one who's going to be working with them and the architects and everybody. And, if asked, they can get that information. Apparently it's readily available on Google Maps. I don't necessarily know that providing that summary is necessary.
well, that was not a
Yeah,
part of
it's not a
the
part.
friendly
That was-
amendment. Yes, I know that was conversation in response to Mr. Mercer's question. So you have heard the motion, you have heard the second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, Please record your vote. Mr. Mercer,
Nay.
Mrs. Barnes,
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette,
Aye.
Mr. Breen,
Aye.
Mr. Farmer,
Nay.
Mrs. Powell,
Aye.
and myself, Dr. Fitch, nay. Let the record reflect that the motion carries 4-3 with Mr. Mercer, Mr. Farmer, Dr. Fitch in opposition. Thank you much. Now, Mr. Farmer,
Yes, ma'am.
we are now at item 5 on the agenda, which calls,
I do not have that in front of me. Is that, does that put us into closed session?
yes, sir, it does.
I do not have anything here to put us into closed session other than the stuff that I have in the past. I can do that if you'd like.
Do you want me to?
We'll let Mr. Mercer make this motion today.
Very good.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Mercer,
I move the Wilson County Board of Education go into closed session to consider confidential personnel matters as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11, A1 and 6, and 115C-319 through 321, and to consult with the Board of Education attorney to preserve the attorney-client privilege as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11, A3.
is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved by Mr. Mercer, seconded by Mrs. Boyette, that the Wilson County Board of Education go into closed session to consider confidential personnel matters as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11 A1 and 6, and 115C through 319, 115C 319 through 321, and to consult with the Board of Education attorney and preserve the attorney-client privilege as provided in North Carolina General Statutes 143-318.11 A3. Please record your vote. Mr. Mercer,
Aye.
Mrs. Barnes,
Aye.
Mrs. Boyette,
Aye.
Mr. Breen,
Aye.
Mr. Farmer,
Aye.
Mrs. Powell,
Aye.
and myself, Dr. Fitch, aye. Let the record reflect that the motion carries unanimously. We are now adjourned to closed session.